Well, this is exciting. We have arrived at the final week for this course. I want to congratulate each and every one of you for your perseverance and your self-discipline in finishing the course this week. We have one more important thing to add to your skill set that you now have acquired in the previous week's study. And that is the skill of refutation. Now that you know how to formulate a standard form categorical argument, prove its validity, you know how to formulate a proposition symbolic logic syllogism and prove its validity. But that's really not enough in today's world. In today's world, you need the technology of refutation. And that's why I've devoted 1/3 of my book, as you've noticed, to the art and the science of refutation. Aristotle, we have been leaning very heavily on Aristotle throughout the course. Aristotle believed that the art of refutation and the skill of refutation is the highest form of human intellect. And he did this because he believed that refutation requires, first of all, that you understand the argument that you're refuting, that you understand the definitions of terms, that you understand the logic, and you understand the evidence that's being offered. Secondly, you have to artfully, skillfully imagine a way to oppose that definition, those definitions, that logic, those logics, that evidence, and those evidences, either from induction or from deduction. And now you know the difference between the two. So in this final week, what we're going to do is we're going to equip you with the technology as to how to go about using the skills that you have, now that you have these skills, to refute any argument. Of course, we're not talking about silly arguments, some of which I presented to you in the class for examples. We're talking about serious arguments. And this week, we get into refuting the arguments that concern most people today, arguments about ethics, morality, politics, religion, and aesthetics. So in lesson 1, we're going to examine how to refute definitions. As you now know, the definitions of terms can either make or break an argument. I was speaking with a student last night on Zoom, and we were discussing how oftentimes we argue for hours, falsely supposing that we're using the same word and the same definition. And at the end of the hours of discussion, we realize, we don't have the same definition of terms. So in lesson number 1 for week number 4, we're going to examine exactly what's going on when people shift or hijack even definitions of terms for some political agenda or moral agenda or religious agenda. So that's lesson 1. Lesson number 2 is we're going to go back and look at how to refute the logic. We now know that for every valid argument that can be composed by you, by me, or by anyone, can be refuted, can be opposed by another valid argument using a different syllogistic form or a different set of the 5 rules of natural inference that we studied in symbolic logic, propositional logic. So we'll look at the logic in lesson number 2. In lesson number 3, this is the big one. Lesson number 3, we're going to look at refuting the evidence. Now, evidence from cause is going to be the big one. A lot of the public debate that goes on in our communities, in the marketplace, in the world of ideas, has to do with cause. Does smoking cause cancer? Does burning fossil fuels cause climate change, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? You're familiar with the debates and the topics of those debates. We're going to examine in lesson number 3 how it's very difficult to prove cause. It's not easy to prove cause conclusively. And that should be obvious by the fact that people can be using the same data sets for climate change or any other popular debate and come to different conclusions. How is that possible? How can people be using the same set of data and come to entirely different conclusions? Aha, it's because of the assumptions. And the assumptions are buried in the definitions. So lesson 1 and lesson 2 and lesson 3 are all tied together through this component element of precise definitions. What is a precise definition? A precise definition is a definition of a word that tells us all of the necessary and sufficient conditions. You remember that from the 20 distinctions of critical thinkers, right? All the necessary and sufficient conditions for making that word mean what it means. Now, in lesson number 4, we're going to be talking about some very difficult topics. Lesson number 4 is going to be occupied by looking at what we call value-laden words embedded in definitions, value-laden phrases that are embedded in premises for arguments, both deductive and inductive arguments. These value-laden terms arise because of some ethical or moral assumptions, as we will see. Or they can arise from political assumptions. We all see that Muslims, Christians, Jews, agnostics, atheists all use different assumptions about ethics and morality. Some believe that ethics and morality are objective, that there is an objective goodness, just as there's an objective truth, an objective reality, and objective beauty. There are those who deny all of that and say, oh, no, there's no such thing as any objective truth, reality, goodness, or beauty. Everything is relative. Well, except what I just said. So we can see that ethical, moral, political, religious, and aesthetic arguments prove to be the most difficult to resolve. That's where all the yelling and screaming comes. That's where all the Twitter fights come. That's where all the unfriending comes on Facebook. And so we're going to examine how to handle ethical, moral, political, and aesthetic arguments. And then in lesson number 5, you're going to get to formulate your own valid argument using either standard form categorical logic or symbolic propositional logic, whichever you prefer. You're going to get to write and formulate your own argument on any topic. It doesn't really matter. Obviously, if you choose a scientific topic, it's going to be easier for you to make a sound argument. If you choose a ethical, moral, political, or aesthetic argument, you're going to find it very, very difficult to offer a sound argument. But even if you do, and I encourage you to do so, please do so. Please pick a topic that has some passionate commitment for you, something you really, really believe in, something you would never like to let go of. And you're going to submit that to me. I'm going to look at it. I'm not going to grade it. I'll offer some comments, but I'm not going to grade it. You're going to grade it. And the way you're going to grade it is you're going to turn right around and you're going to formulate a refutation to your own argument. Yes, that's right. The argument that you hold near and dear, you're going to refute it because it can be refuted. And this is the crown jewel in the laurels of a critical thinker, a person who can examine opposing points of view, not be afraid of them, not freak out emotionally, not lash out politically, but a person who can calmly and reflectively examine their own views and the views of others and come to a rational decision. And that's going to be it. I will be receiving your thesis argument, the one that you're going to defend the one that you're passionately committed on. And then I'll respond to that with a few comments. Well, I'm not going to try to refute it. I'll just offer some suggestions. Then you're going to turn around and you're going to submit your own refutation. And I'll respond to that. You're going to send me the refutation. And then you're going to include some notes on what you have learned. What have you learned in this course? Has it been a valuable experience for you? If so, why so? If not, why not? But I can tell you that I've enjoyed it. I always do. And as I say at the end of every class, at the end of every semester, I always tell my students, thank you for what you have taught me. Because even though you think that you have learned from me, the truth of the matter is, I have learned just by trying to explain things that I thought that I already knew, and also listening to your comments. Thank you for your video Zoom conferences, by the way. I've learned many insights about the way people are thinking beyond my household, and I appreciate that. So I wish you best wishes for week number 4. It's a very important week. It's the capstone of what we have been doing here. Thank you and good luck.